Chapter 10 begins with the underground man mocking the utopian fascination with the idea of a crystal palace, an indestructible building that epitomizes rationality. The crystal palace has been used since before Dostoevsky was writing to depict utopic worlds and utopic ideals, and I think he's definitely drawing on that popular image to dissect it and take it down in this book. So the underground man fears the Crystal Palace because he is, quote, unable to stick his tongue out of it. He's unable to make fun of it or mock it due to its inherently rational perfection. He then mentions that if the palace were actually a chicken coop, he would find more use for it than he does it as a palace, since at least it would give him shelter from the rain. He's careful never to desire a crystal palace because he says that if he did, he would refuse to accept anything less, like the mundane accommodations of city life, which are his unfortunate reality, as well as the reality of all of his readers who supposedly support the idea of the Crystal Palace. He also goes on to say that in the world where he did desire the Crystal Palace but did not receive it, he would retreat to the underground if nobody paid attention to him, further embittered by not getting his way. About halfway through the chapter, the underground man doubts himself again, telling the readers to forget that he has rejected the Crystal Palace. He wonders if he was only ever upset because he has nothing to make fun of in a world where the Crystal Palace is a reality, or if he has genuine criticisms on the palace as a whole. He goes on to call desire a hoax, relating again to the idea that desiring a rational ideal causes indefinite dissatisfaction with reality's circumstances. In this way, the underground man actually absorbs those who look to rationality as an ideal, because he says that if you desire a rational ideal, you will be stuck in a state of chronic dissatisfaction, as all existentialists are. He ends the chapter by remarking that he has been talking too much, which is the first spark of a very meta confrontation that he has with his readers, which eventually culminates in chapter 11 and the switching of the literary format. Chapter 11 is the final chapter in the underground section of this book, and it begins with the underground man asserting that his conscious inertia, his purposefully static nature, sets him apart from normal men who crave action. He also says that his underground life is better than that of the normal man, but he continues to envy the normal man anyways. This isn't the first time that he's contrasted himself with the normal man, with its first reference being to a man who rams himself into a wall rather than scurrying around it like a mouse does. So the underground man then goes on to declare that he has been lying, and that in fact he believes nothing of what he's written so far, even if at the time of writing he thought he believed it. This ties back to the underground man's earlier speech where he described how he began to enjoy tormenting his coworkers, and how his harmful actions first caused him to admonish himself, but later find joy. In that situation, the underground man resolved that he was lying to himself about feeling bad about his actions. Now, he expresses that he has been lying to himself about feeling joy. This statement is followed by a long speech by the underground man's imagined outraged audience, who chastise him for his inconsistency and list out the many contradictions he had. We tell him, "You talk nonsense and are pleased with it. You say impudent things and are in continual alarm and are apologizing for them. You declare that you are afraid of nothing, and at the same time try to ingratiate yourself in our good opinion. You declare that you are gnashing your teeth, and at the same time you try to be witty so as to amuse us. You know that your witticisms are not witty, but you are evidently well satisfied in their literary value. You may perhaps have really suffered, but you have no respect for your own suffering. You may have sincerity, but you have no modesty. You doubtlessly mean to say something, but hide your last word through fear, because you have not the resolution to utter it, and only have a cowardly impudence. You boast of consciousness, but you are not sure of your own ground. To these accusations, the underground man responds that he has made up the audience's entire speech, and mocks them for thinking that his book is truly a published book, or that this is truly an ongoing conversation between writer and readers. He reveals that these notes are his attempt to confront his own memories and thoughts that he himself has trouble with thinking, even privately. At the end of the underground section of the book, chapter 11 culminates in the underground man analyzing his own psyche before he abandons the format of notes entirely and transitions into a narrative story in Apropos of the Wet Snow. Chapter 12 isn't really a full chapter, but it's more of a prologue or a epigraph to the second part of the book. It's actually a poem written by this guy, Nikolai Nekrasov, who was writing a few years before Dostoevsky was. Nekrasov was a Russian romanticist who wrote compassionate poems about peasants and workers. This particular poem is about a man, the speaker, who is talking to and about a reformed prostitute. This style of writing that Nekrasov uses in the poem is very overwrought and flowery, and it has a romanticism and idealism that the underground man notably lacks and does not enjoy. Also, the plot of the poem itself goes on to relate to the underground man's initial thoughts towards Liza, a prostitute whom he wants to reform, later in Apropos of the Wet Snow. Okay, these are just a few discussion questions that I thought I would add here that relate to the last couple chapters. Okay, and that was my presentation on the last couple chapters of part 1 of Notes from the Underground. Thank you.